What are we going to do about reinstating the fuel, the 4 billion gallons of ethanol that was scraped away? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. You're a railroad guy. You know I'm a railroad guy. I've traveled over 2,300,000 miles on Amtrak. On the substantive question, look, there's a reason why the people that, have you ever heard of a president, a sitting president, spending millions and millions of dollars, all more than a year before a general election, trying to pick the nominee for the other party? Huh? Well, guess who's spending the money doing these ads about me? Big oil companies, the NRA and the gun manufacturers, as well as the insurance companies. Because they know if I get elected, I'm going to beat them again. But anyway, here's the deal. What's happened is that you should not be surprised. The commitment made, and I just was at one of your larger ethanol plants day before yesterday. The fact is, it's a very, very important transitional fuel for us to get to a place where we burn cleaner energy across the board. And we're going to move into, mark my words, we're going to move into more refined versions of ethanol. You're going to see cellulosics come along as well. But here's the deal. What's happened is the oil companies put pressure on them. So what they do? They went ahead and did what Carl Icahn, I didn't know he said that exactly, but what Carl Icahn said he's going to do. What they're going to do is they're shutting, you see these plants closing, and by the way, they're providing really good jobs. Average job is about $54,000 a year to people. It's helping the rural economy in a significant way. And so one of the things that's, and then the president made a deal with so much pressure because this ridiculous trade deal, non-deal, this war we got into with China on all the wrong things. The reason we should be dealing with China is stealing our intellectual property. China is stealing businesses. It is not because of the fact that the farmers in Iowa and across the country have established a market in China. That's not a problem for the United States, that trade, quote, deficit. It's about what they're doing to control the international economy, not that. And so what's happened is, you see the president comes along, and because farmers are getting killed by his trade deal to begin with, and manufacturers, he comes along and he says, he gets so much pressure, this election coming up, what did he say? He said, well, we're going to go back. We're going to raise the standard again. And we're going to make it a... But guess what? He's not doing that either now. Not doing either. So there's only, all kidding aside, there's one answer. And I'm not joking. We got to defeat him. As long as he's there, you're going to see virtually no progress. And look what he just did with regard to coal. He lifted all the restrictions on methane and everything else going into the atmosphere. It's stuff that's killing people. It's killing people. And what you've done out here and demonstrated in Iowa is that you've provided a whole lot of jobs because of over the hundreds of millions of dollars we invested in renewable energy, in wind and solar. And we're in a position now where it is now competitive with coal on a BTU basis. No one's going to build a new coal-fired plant because, in fact, it's too hard to maintain it. Not only because it relates to pollution, but because we've learned how now to provide plants that are competitive on a BTU unit rate that are, in fact, not as pollutant as ever. So this fella is a guy who I don't think he knows, I'm not being facetious, I don't think he knows what he's doing. If he knows what he's doing, he is doing things knowingly badly. And so, but it's the only, but if you think about it all, every one of the things we care about, from education to healthcare to the environment to a whole range of things we haven't even mentioned, relate to the fact that this president has to go. As long as he's there, it's not going to happen. It's a simple proposition. I really mean it.
What are we going to do to address rising drug prices?
In my healthcare plan, we do three things. We significantly reduce drug prices. Here's the deal. There are other drugs, in terms of insulins and other things, that have gone from costing a total of $22,000 a year to $140,000 a year. Not a single thing has happened. No new product, no new investment. Same exact drug that was, in fact, made available under the law, and they've got a patent for when it went into place. So there's three things we do. One, my plan calls for Medicare to be, now there's not people on Medicare, but Medicare to be able to negotiate drug prices because they're the single largest purchaser of drugs across the board. That will significantly drop. Right now they're prohibited from negotiating with the drug companies that say, we're only going to pay you this amount. And if you don't sell it to us that, we're going to go somewhere else and find it. Well, allow them to negotiate, number one. Number two, there is a proposal that I put forward after a whole lot of thought. You may recall that I headed up this thing called the, when we talked about the cancer moonshot. And because I got deeply involved in this issue, I went and visited all but two of the leading cancer research facilities in the world, not just here in the world, because I wanted to find out as much as I could about what was happening, because my son had just been diagnosed with this disease, and so many people I knew, not only in my family and others, had died. Raise your hand if you lost anyone to cancer or you're dealing with it yourself. Okay? This is a national, international problem. And so what happened from this was I learned a lot more about the nature of what's going on in terms of drugs. The drugs of the future are bio-based drugs, not chemical-based drugs, because you're dealing with the immune system. We're engaging the immune system now in ways that were viewed as voodoo science 8 years ago. But now it's coming to its own. You're using your immune system to kill disease in your body, particular cancer cells and other things. And so they're very, very expensive. So there's a proposal that I spent a lot of time, and I put together after we left office. 21 cancer hospitals, 5 Nobel laureates, and a number of other people came to me and said, would I continue a Biden cancer initiative as a private citizen, because the president wasn't picking it up to do the things that we were really making great progress on in terms of dealing with both cures and or changing some cancers from death sentences to diseases that could be tolerated and dealt with in the immune system. And so what happened was that I got a group of people together, leading experts in the nation, and they decided that I said, how do we keep down drug costs that are coming up, because they're going to be incredibly expensive. Drug companies made the argument, and I've had this direct confrontation or discussion with, I think it's 9 of the leading drug companies, and they think they should be able to charge for the drug they come up with based on its efficacy. Meaning if they find a life-saving drug for a particular, 204 different cancers, for example. If they come up with a drug that in fact can cure a particular cancer or any other disease, they should be able to charge whatever they want for it. Well, it's the exact opposite. If it's a life-saving drug, how can you say to a nation, you can get it because you can afford, $200,000 a year for the drug, and you can't get it because you can't? And I said, no, that's not the way it should work. The way it should work, I wasn't unique in this, but I took the position, that's not the way it should work. You should get a significant return on your investment, kind of like a utility. If you invested, $5 in producing a drug, you should be able to charge for that drug X amount of dollars. But what they have now in other countries, and what I propose, and I will get done because I've been able to do this at the Department of Health, in other areas, on other subjects, that in order to get a patent for the drug, you've got to come before this group of leading experts, not in the government, outside the government, to sit there and say, okay, what is the efficacy of the drug? And secondly, how much did you invest in this drug? And you'll be able to get a significant return on your investment, more than just 2%, 5%, a significant return on your investment and the research and development you did. But we will set the price you can charge before you get the patent for the drug. And once you get the patent for the drug, unless you can demonstrate that you've had to change some ingredient or do more experimentation to make it better, you cannot charge more for that drug than the cost of medical inflation. So you can't ever go from an EpiPen costing the equivalent of $1 to $10. You can't do that anymore. We'll get that done because the public, Democrat, Republican, and Independent, all realize that's the only fair way. That's the way other countries do it. And by the way, in addition to the fact that you talk about, for example, the AIDS drugs, some that cost 1/20th of what it costed. What I propose is that if the FDA can authorize and attest to the efficacy of the drug, no matter where it is, you should be able to buy it there. You should be able to import it. And that's the way in which we can significantly drive down drug costs and still not come up with a system that you don't get rewarded for innovation. We want to reward people so they go out and they find, we have brilliant people, find new ways to find new cures to new things. And they should be able to get rewarded for it, and significantly rewarded, but not be able to charge whatever they want to do and raise prices exponentially because they know people are in desperate need. That's what.
My question is that when you become our next president, how will you help with the criminal justice system? And I'm speaking in reference of where people have been gunned down in the street by people who are supposed to serve and protect. And now we have 2 cases in Texas, I believe, where 2 people have been killed inside their own homes. I fear that if anything ever went wrong at my house, to call the police.
History shows you have a reason to be. I come out of the Civil Rights Movement. One of the things that still exists in this nation, and people who don't live in the community, they don't reject it, but they just don't understand it, is that there's still institutional racism that exists in America. And it goes across the board, by the way. For example, in America, if you live in a predominantly black neighborhood with the exact same home and the same condition that's in a predominantly white neighborhood, the black neighborhood home is valued at less. If you get insurance, even though you have a better driving record for the same automobile and you live in a black neighborhood, you pay more than you do in a white neighborhood. It's red line, I go through it all, but let's talk about the criminal justice system. Number 1, I get overwhelming support from law enforcement, but I tell them all the same thing. Just like there are bad senators, there's bad doctors, there's bad lawyers, there's bad engineers, there's bad cops. There's bad cops. And there's an obligation for law enforcement to police themselves. That requires 3 things. 1, when they act in a way that is inconsistent with the law, they should be held accountable. They should go to jail. They should be the ones. But secondly, we have to do what we're doing now. Like, for example, in my campaign, when I started the campaign, it made everybody had to take a sensitivity training on the way in which today to treat women and what I expect how women should be treated. So they know exactly what the deal is. Because a lot of people just aren't educated to it. Well, I think we have to train police officers and law enforcement in what to look for and how to deal with the problems that exist in communities, particularly communities of color, which they're not familiar with. And I might add, some African-American policemen have not been so good, okay? And so, number 2, we have to deal with better training. I think there has to be total transparency in the system. Firefighters know that. These guys go in and they in fact risk their lives. By the way, more firefighters die or get injured on a percentage basis than law enforcement does. And we have to police our own, number 1. Number 2, the way in which we should be dealing with the criminal justice system is there is overwhelming evidence that the relationships between how someone gets into the criminal justice stream and how someone doesn't. What keeps them out? Let me give you an example. If in fact you come from a circumstance where you don't have access to good education, where in fact you're in an area where there is very little social responsibility and help to get young kids through difficult times, black or white, poor communities, there's an increased possibility that you're going to be caught up in the crime and drug stream. One of the things that I believe very strongly we have to do, and my daughter's a social worker, she ran the criminal justice board in the state of Delaware, and now she's running the Boys and Girls Clubs, is that in fact what happens is that you have to give people excuses to do the right thing. If you live in a very tough neighborhood, look, we talk about mass shootings that occur in our schools. But there's a mass shooting taking place right now in the black community, I promise you. More people are dying today and sitting on their front porch minding their own business and getting shot by a stray bullet. And the psychological impact and the mental the impact on mental health for children and parents not worrying that when they send their kid off to the school bus, whether or not they're going to be okay because they happen to be African American. We significantly arrest more African Americans for everything, and blind stops for traffic stops, blind stops for a whole range of things. And so we got to change the way in which we deal with this. But as you get to the actual system itself, I believe we have to change, and it doesn't just affect African Americans. We have to change the system from one of punishment and retribution to one of rehabilitation. Rehabilitation as well as reconstituting people. For example, it's in everybody's interest, no matter what you think, that in fact if somebody gets sent to jail, why in God's name wouldn't we say to them that they should in fact get an education while they're in jail? Well, we're rewarding them. Rewarding them? Heck, we're rewarding you. We're rewarding the public at large. No, I'm serious. What happens when you let somebody out of jail, no matter how long they serve their time? They get a bus ticket and 25 bucks. And what are they going to do? They're going to go back to exactly where they were before. They're going to get caught up again. So here's what we should be doing. We should not send anyone to a prison who's convicted of a drug offense where it relates to possession. We should be demanding they do what I set up drug courts. They go to a drug court and they get sentenced to a rehabilitation facility that in fact, no, we don't need to build more prisons, we need to build more rehab facilities. And I've done hundreds of hours of hearings on this. You're just as likely to reduce crime by having someone in a drug rehab position for the same amount of time as you put someone in jail. And in jail, you do nothing to help them. And if you go to prison for an offense that includes something beyond drug use, you should get drug treatment while you're in prison. When you get out of prison, you should have your black or white, you should have your slate cleaned. You should be able to, you've served your time, you should be able to take advantage of Pell Grants to go to school. You should be able to have access to public housing. You should be able to be in a position where you can get an education. You should be in a position where you have access. Our prison, and by the way, what we don't need any more mandatory sentences. All we're doing is filling up our prisons. No, I really mean it. I'm sorry. No more private prisons. No more private prisons.
I'm a teacher, so I want you to be as specific as the question I'm going to ask you. Now, if we're going to caucus for you, what do you consider to be the 5 most important planks to your platform for the campaign? And I need my answer in a minute and a half.
And obviously, Judge, you don't know a lot. You can do it in a minute and a half. Number 1. Begin to treat people with dignity. We hold these truths self-evident. Hold up what we say we believe. Number 2, give working class people a fighting chance by providing health care, education access, and dealing with the ability to take care of children, including as a single parent for a long time, including the cost of child care. Now, number 3, make sure that we fundamentally change the way in which we deal with the healthcare system. But maybe the single most important thing to do is acknowledge that the existential threat to humanity is climate change, and we must act on it right now. Again, and we can do that. They're the most important things, I think, if I had to pick immediately. And the other piece of this is, look, on day one, I'm going to send to the United States Senate and the Congress a bill to, in fact, find a path to citizenship for the 14 million people who are out there. I'm going to take the dreamers and make sure the dreamers are automatically there. They're already there. I'm going to make sure that we rejoin the Paris Peace Accord on day one. And I'm going to announce within the first 100 days, those 173 nations are going to come and meet in Washington, D.C. to up the ante. That's more than 5. Because we got more than 5 problems, Judge. Thanks, everybody.